All right, let's talk about one of the most infamous battles in all of history, the Somme. For so many of us, that name just means one thing: pointless, horrific slaughter. But what if the story we all think we know is just one tiny piece of the truth? We're going to peel back the layers of the myth on this one. So when you picture the Somme, you probably picture something like this: a moonscape, right? Just craters and splintered wood. For more than 100 years, this exact kind of image has cemented the battle in our minds as the ultimate symbol of a bloody, going nowhere stalemate. And this quote, wow, it just captures that popular idea perfectly. This picture of lions led by donkeys, brave soldiers just thrown into the meat grinder by clueless generals who had no ideas other than apply more force. That narrative has really defined how we see the Somme. But yeah, is that the whole story? Not even close. In this explainer, we're going to dig into 4 different competing realities of what actually happened. We'll step inside the commander's tent, we'll uncover a forgotten Allied victory, witness the messy debut of a total game-changing weapon, and, literally dig into the battlefield itself. So, let's start at the very top. We're heading into the command center to look at the super complicated legacy of the man right at the center of all this controversy, Commander Sir Douglas Haig. What's so wild about Haig is just how fiercely his reputation is debated. I mean, was he the butcher of the Somme, a bungler who just wasted lives? Or was he the architect of victory, a guy who was actually forward-thinking and embraced new tech? For decades, it felt like you had to pick one of those 2 extremes. But the real story, as historians like J.P. Harris have shown, is way, way more complex. Haig was a man of huge contradictions. I mean, on the one hand, he was all in on new stuff like tanks and aircraft. He even set up a special training directorate to teach the latest tactics. But on the other hand, the guy was famously a terrible communicator who just couldn't connect with his officers, and his stubborn obsession with breakthrough attacks, well, it cost an enormous number of lives, needlessly. He was a visionary who was often his own worst enemy. And it gets even more complicated because we almost always talk about the Somme as if it was just a British tragedy. But they were not fighting alone. It's a fact that's been kind of written out of the story, but on day 1, July 1st, 1916, France had 11 divisions in the fight, right there next to Britain's 13. The French army played a huge and, it turns out, a surprisingly successful role that you almost never hear about. A huge reason for their success? Firepower. Just look at this. The French brought 555 heavy guns to their section of the front. The British only had 362, and they were spread out over a much wider area. That massive concentration of French artillery made all the difference. And the result was night and day. While the British got bogged down in that infamous disaster, the French attack was it was a stunning success. They took all their objectives, captured thousands of German prisoners, and did it all with relatively few casualties. It was a textbook modern assault. They had done it. They had a breakthrough, a real, honest-to-God opportunity that could have changed the war. And then it was thrown away. The French generalissimo, Joseph Joffre, gave what his own staff called an incomprehensible order to just stop the attack, and just like that, the moment was gone. A failure of command, not a failure of the soldiers, that might have actually made the war drag on even longer. So, as the French attack grinds to a halt because of a bad call from the top, the British are about to try something completely new, which brings us to our third perspective, the chaotic, flawed, but totally revolutionary debut of the tank. The tank's first day on the battlefield was a story of total paradox. You had this, a brand new Mark I tank, broken down and stuck in a ditch, totally useless. And then you had this, troops literally cheering as their new steel monster arrives. It was a day of just massive mechanical failure mixed with an incredible psychological boost. And the numbers, they tell a pretty brutal story. Out of 49 tanks they sent out, an incredible 65% of them either broke down or got stuck before they even got to the fight. 65%. Only 9 tanks, just 20% of the total, actually managed to help the infantry. But, and this is a huge but, for the few that actually worked, the impact was huge. Take this one, C5, nicknamed Creme de Menthe. It basically broke a stalemate all by itself. As it clanked forward, German defenders were so terrified they just ran, which inspired the Canadian troops who were pinned down to get up and charge after it. So no, this wasn't a big strategic win. As the Canadian commander Julian Byng put it, Tanks were just a useful accessory. But the real victory here was proof of concept. It proved that this flawed, unreliable, but absolutely terrifying new weapon had a future, and it would go on to change everything about war. All right, for our last perspective, we're going to zoom all the way in. We're shifting from grand strategy and new weapons right down into the mud and dirt the battle was fought on, where archaeologists are still finding secrets more than a century later. So how in the world do you see a battlefield that's been overgrown for 100 years? Well, today, archaeologists use this amazing tech called LiDAR. They basically fly a laser scanner over the area, and it digitally erases all the trees, revealing the faint, ghost-like scars of the old trenches right there on the forest floor. It's incredible. And these high-tech maps let them know exactly where to dig. And what they find? Man, it just hits you. The actual tangible stuff of a soldier's life. A leather boot, a shovel, uniform buttons, a bayonet. It's a direct, physical connection to the guys who were actually there. And this kind of mapping leads to some unbelievable discoveries. What you're looking at here is the archaeological plan for a trench that they were able to identify as a specific German position, a position the British called Strip Trench. This was a key target for the 38th Welsh Division. And this is where it gets really powerful. This trench, this physical line in the dirt, connects us directly to the poet David Jones. He fought here with the Welsh Division. When he wrote in his masterpiece In Parenthesis about the absolute chaos of fighting, Bosch is back in Strip Trench, it's a monumental bollocks every time. He's writing about this exact spot, the place archaeologists dug up 100 years later. So you see, when we look at the Somme from all these different angles, from Haig's tent, from the French lines, from inside a tank, and from the ground itself, that simple myth of pointless slaughter just dissolves. What you get instead is something so much richer and more compelling. Yes, it was a tragedy, but it was also a tactical laboratory, a huge Allied struggle, and a deeply human story that's literally written into the landscape. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought. The story of the Somme isn't some fixed thing set in stone. It's a living history, and it keeps changing with every forgotten story we find and every single artifact we pull out of the ground. It really makes you think, doesn't it? How does what we choose to remember and what we physically unearth actually change the story of our own past?